Today we're going to talk about simplifying radicals. Remember that a radical is the value that's underneath the square root. The value underneath the square root is actually called the radicand, and the square root is called the radical. The first thing that you want to do is make sure you know what your first 10 perfect squares are. To the side, I've already sketched the first 10 perfect squares. Notice that I didn't include 1 squared. I know that 1 squared equals 1. I'm going to be looking for factors out of all of these numbers, and 1 is not going to be a helpful factor for me, so I left it off my list. The thing that you want to look for is the biggest perfect square that goes into your number. If I was to start with the square root of 32, and I wanted to choose any perfect square that goes into it, my first thought would be 4. I know that 4 goes into 32. 4 is not the biggest perfect square that goes into 32. There's a bigger one, and I'm going to show you how to use the bigger one in a second. But let's say you didn't know that and you wanted to use 4. You would break it down so that you find the factors of 32. You know that one of them has to be a perfect square, so it's 4. I know that 4 times 8 is 32, so those are my 2 factors. Now, I'm taking the square root of both of these, so I need to leave my square root sign. I already know what the square root of 4 is. It's 2. So I'm going to rewrite the square root of 4 as just 2 without the square root sign. Now, 8 is not a perfect square. It's nowhere on my squares chart over here. So I can't get rid of the square root sign or take the square root of 8. I have to leave it. When I write it, I'm going to write the 2 out in front, and that stands for 2 times the square root of 8. Now you have to ask yourself if the square root of 8 is in simplest form. I have to think to myself, are there any perfect squares that go into 8? If I look over here on the side, I can see that 4 goes into 8. So if I was to break this one down again, I would have to break the square root of 8 down. The 2 factors of 8 are 4 and 2. It's always a good idea to write the perfect square first because you're going to be taking the square root of it and putting it outside of the radical, so you want to write it first. I know that the square root of 4 is 2. I don't know what the square root of 2 is, so I'm going to rewrite it. Now, this entire time, I ignored that original 2 that was outside of my radical. When I rewrote this as the square root of 4 and the square root of 2, I didn't copy this 2 down. Once you've broken down the square root of 8 into 4 and 2, remember that you have to multiply by the 2 that was already outside of the radical. So you took the square root of 4 and got 1 2, and you took the square root of 4 up here and got a second 2. So there should be 2 2's outside of the radical. You just multiply the values outside of the radical. 2 times 2 is 4. And your answer is 4 times the square root of 2. Now you know it's in simplest form because there's no numbers that go into 2 other than 1. 1's a perfect square, but it doesn't help you. 2 is not a perfect square. There's nothing that goes into it. So this is as simple as it gets. Now, if you recognize that there was a bigger perfect square that went into 32, you could have used 16. 16 also goes into 32. It is much easier and simpler if you pick the biggest perfect square. If I'd use 16 instead, I know that 16 times 2 are the factors that give me 32. Notice I wrote my perfect square first. I'm going to take the square root of 16 and the square root of 2. The square root of 16 is 4. The square root of 2 can't be simplified. There's no perfect squares that go into it. So I'm just going to rewrite it. And my answer is 4 times the square root of 2. Now notice, when I chose to use 16, I got to my final answer in 1 step. If I chose to use 4, which is a perfect square, but it's not the biggest perfect square, I had to do multiple steps. I am far more likely to make an error doing it the first way than if I went straight to the biggest perfect square. So when you're solving these, make sure you're looking for the biggest perfect square. Now, if I wanted to simplify a radical with a value outside the radicand, okay, I'm going to ignore the value outside the radicand just like I ignored this 2 over here when I was breaking it down. So I'm going to pretend like that 3 is not even there, and I'm just going to break down the square root of 12. Now the biggest perfect square that goes into 12 is 4, so I'm going to break this down into the factors. 4 times 3 gives me 12. I'm going to take the square root of 4 and the square root of 3. I know the square root of 4 is 2. I don't know what the square root of 3 is, but there's no perfect squares that go into it, so I can leave it alone. Now I'm going to bring down the 3 that was already outside my radicand because I have to multiply that. 3 times 2 is 6, and my answer is 6 times the square root of 3. Now, to show you that these are actually give you the same value, if you were to go to your calculator and you were to do 3 times the square root of 12, you get 10.39, etc., etc., etc. If you were to take the simplified answer, 6 times the square root of 3, you also get 10.39, etc., etc. So they're identical. That's a good way for you to check your answer if you have access to a calculator. Multiply out your original problem, multiply out your answer. If they match, then you at least haven't made any mistakes. Your final answer still may not be in simplest form, but at least you know that these two are in fact the same value. Now in both of these we've used factors of 4. If I was to pick a different radical, I could use other ones to help me break it down. For example, if I wanted to do 2 times the square root of 98, and I'm going to make that a negative 2, so we practice one with a negative. I need to find the biggest perfect square that goes into 98. Now 98 is an unusual number, okay? If I did not know what values went into 98, I'd probably have to use a calculator if you have access to one and start dividing. Well, 4 doesn't go into 98 evenly, okay? I know 9 doesn't because 9 goes into 99. If 4 doesn't go into it, 16 is not going to go into it. I know 25 doesn't. Probably not 36 because 4 goes into 36, but I'll check it. 36 doesn't go into it. Now let's try 49. Oops, let's try 49 and not 19. Okay, 49 goes into it 2 times, so I found my biggest perfect square. So when I write this out, I am going to take the square root of 98 as the square root of 49 and the square root of 2. Those are the two factors that go into it. I'm ignoring the negative 2 until I'm done simplifying. The square root of 49 is 7. I cannot simplify the square root of 2 at all, so I leave it alone. Bring down the negative 2 that was already out there. Negative 2 times 7 is 14, negative 14. So your answer is negative 14 times the square root of 2. And again, you can check that with a calculator. Negative 2 times the square root of 98 gives me negative 19.7, etc. Negative 14 times the square root of 2 also gives me negative 19.7, etc.